My sister faked a pregnancy after I caught her stealing $200,000 from our family to avoid consequences. So I went nuclear with evidence. Years later, she's calling, trying to bribe us with dark family secrets. My psychotic spoiled sister told our entire family that she had caught me stealing from our grandmother. The whole thing started at Sunday dinner when Stella stood up dramatically and placed her hand over her heart. My spiritual advisor Moonbeam has helped me unlock a vision. "You stole from Grandma. I saw it," she screamed while pointing at me. I laughed because I thought she was joking until I saw the tears streaming down her face. Mom immediately rushed to comfort Stella, while Dad gave me this disappointed look. I tried to explain that I hadn't even been to Grandma's house in 2 weeks, but Stella started sobbing harder. She said the vision showed me wearing my blue hoodie, which proved it was recent since I just bought it. Grandma sat there in silence, clutching her pearls like they were enough to glue our family back together. I didn't even defend myself. I just waited for the kerfuffle to die down before checking Grandma's accounts to prove they still had her money. But what I saw made my heart drop. The checking account that had $15,000 for 10 years straight now showed a balance of 43 cents. I immediately dialed Grandma's number. And surprise, surprise, Stella had been the one to handle her finances for the past 6 months. That evening, I printed out all the bank statements and drove to my parents' house. Stella was there getting a foot massage from Mom, while Dad made her favorite smoothie. There were dozens of charges to something called Serenity Spirit Retreat. Each charge was exactly $3,000. When my dad picked up the statements with trembling hands, I expected him to finally stick it to Stella. "Stella, why is Grandma's checking account empty?" Stella rolled her eyes before saying, "Material wealth was blocking Grandma's chakras. I moved the money to a higher vibrational plane through the retreat center. You're effing welcome." My dad's face went pale, like all the years of raising a spoiled brat was hitting him all at once. Meanwhile, my mom nodded along like it made perfect sense. Heck, she even thanked her. As soon as the room went silent, I slipped out and drove home. I was honestly planning on never speaking to Stella or my parents again. But the next morning, I woke up to a black SUV pulling up to my driveway. 2 huge guys got out and knocked on the door. And I've watched the movie Rocky enough times to know that they were loan sharks. You see, Grandma's savings wasn't enough for the retreat. She had to borrow another $30,000 from some very unofficial lenders too. The men explained that payment was due immediately. I tried to negotiate, but the men weren't interested in payment plans. If they didn't get their money in 48 hours, they'd start the foreclosure process. And before I could ask anything else, they got in their car and left. Well, I wasn't taking the fall for Stella's BS. But when I got to my parents' house, Uncle Jerry was already there. He pulled me aside before I could even speak. "Listen, kiddo, I know this isn't fair, but you need to confess to taking Grandma's money. If you admit to it, then insurance might cover the loss, and we could protect Grandma's house." I stared at him in disbelief. He actually wanted me to take the fall for Stella's delusions. "Jerry, I'm sorry, but no. I knew you would refuse, you effing bitch. Your family needs you, and you're letting them down. Be an effing man and grow up." That's when I realized I was surrounded by idiots. The emergency family meeting that night was brutal. Stella sat in the middle of it all with tears streaming down her face. "I just can't understand why everyone is attacking me for trying to elevate our family's consciousness," she repeated over and over. She even brought Moonbeam, who sat beside her nodding and mentioning that she accepted Venmo for emergency spiritual counseling. Grandma finally spoke up. "I won't let my grandchild take the blame for this. I'll sell the house." Her voice was quiet, but firm. The room erupted in arguments, but Grandma raised her hand. "I trusted Stella with my money. This is my consequence to face." I sighed. That's when I knew I had to step up. Not for Stella and definitely not for my parents, but for my grandmother. The woman who always slipped hard candy into my pocket when she watched my parents ignore me on my birthday. The woman who gave me a full plate of food when my parents insisted that I was greedy and all the food should go to Stella. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, just drained my savings account and handed it over to the loan sharks before cutting everyone off. Good riddance. But the next day, I woke up to 37 voicemails and 99 plus text messages. Stella had found out what I'd done and had told the entire family that I was ruining their spiritual experience. I scrolled through the messages while my coffee got cold. Most were variations of "How dare you and you're destroying our family's spiritual journey." But one text from an unknown number caught my attention. It simply said, "Check your credit report now." My hands shook as I logged into the credit monitoring site. The screen loaded slowly, each second feeling like an hour. When it finally appeared, I nearly dropped my phone. 7 new credit cards had been opened in my name over the past 3 months. The total balance across all of them was $45,000. Every single charge was to Serenity Spirit Retreat. I immediately called the credit card companies, but they all said the same thing. The applications had my social security number, my date of birth, and even used my old addresses. The signatures matched too. When I insisted it was fraud, they told me I'd need to file a police report. At the police station, Officer Nishi took my statement while I showed him all the evidence. The fraudulent accounts, the bank statements showing Stella's access to Grandma's finances, everything. He nodded sympathetically and said they'd investigate. I felt relief washing over me until my parents walked through the door with Stella. She was clutching a manila folder to her chest, tears already streaming. "Officers, I'm so glad you're here. My brother is trying to destroy me because he's jealous of my spiritual gifts." She handed over the folder with shaking hands. Inside was a document that made my blood run cold. It was supposedly a co-signing agreement where I'd agreed to help fund Stella's spiritual investments. My signature was at the bottom, but I'd never seen this paper before in my life. The date was from 2 months ago, right around when the first credit cards were opened. Mom stepped forward, dabbing at her eyes. We were there when he signed it. He was so supportive of Stella's journey at first, but now that the bills are coming due, he's trying to back out. Dad nodded solemnly. It's been hard watching our son turn on his sister like this. We just want what's best for both of them. Officer Nishi looked between us, clearly unsure who to believe. He said since this appeared to be a family dispute over a valid contract, it was a civil matter, not criminal. I could contest it in court, but for now, the debt was legally mine. I left the station feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. My own parents had just helped Stella frame me for identity theft. As I sat in my car trying to process what happened, my phone buzzed. It was my boss, Kyle. We need to talk. Can you come to the office right now? The drive to work felt surreal. When I walked in, Kyle was waiting in his office with our HR manager, Lauren. On his desk were printed screenshots of social media posts from my account calling the company a soul-sucking hellhole, and our biggest client a pompous windbag. I leaned closer to look at them. The posts were dated from last week. Times when I knew I'd been asleep or in meetings. Kyle, I didn't write these. Someone must have hacked my account. He sighed heavily. Look, I want to believe you. You've been a good employee for 3 years, but the client saw these and is threatening to pull their contract. The board wants you gone. Lauren spoke up. We've had to do damage control all morning. The posts were made from your IP address at home. My mind raced. Stella had been to my apartment last month for what she called a peace offering dinner. She must gotten into my computer then. Please just give me a chance to prove this wasn't me. Check my work computer's browser history. Anything. Kyle rubbed his temples. I'm putting you on probation. One more incident, even a small one, and you're out. And you need to personally apologize to the client by end of week. I thanked him and practically ran out of the office. As I sat in the parking lot, my phone rang. It was Lauren, but not work Lauren. My girlfriend Lauren. We need to talk, she said. Her voice cold. I've been getting messages about you all morning. My stomach dropped. What kind of messages? Someone claiming to be a concerned friend sent me screenshots of police reports about you stealing from elderly family members, and something about a violent incident in college? Why didn't you tell me about any of this? I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Lauren, none of that is true. It's Stella. She's trying to destroy my life because I exposed her theft. There was a long pause. I want to believe you, but these messages have a lot of details. Dates, case numbers, even photos of you at what looks like a police station today. Please, just let me show you the real bank records. I can prove she's the one who stole from Grandma. We met at a coffee shop an hour later. I spread out all the bank statements, showing the systematic of Grandma's account. Lauren studied them carefully, her expression softening as she recognized the truth. Oh my God, she whispered. Your sister really did this, and your parents are helping her? I nodded, feeling exhausted. She's opened credit cards in my name too. $45,000 worth. Lauren reached across the table and took my hand. I'm so sorry I doubted you. Those messages were just so convincing, and they came from multiple accounts. That evening, I stopped by Grandma's house to check on her. She was in her living room, staring at old photo albums. When she saw me, her face lit up. I'm so glad you're here, she said, patting the couch beside her. I need to tell you something. She pulled out a small digital recorder from between the couch cushions. I've been recording Stella when she visits. Yesterday, she didn't know it was on. She pressed play, and Stella's voice filled the room. Can you believe they actually bought that vision nonsense? Moonbeam and I have been laughing about it all week. These spiritual retreats are the perfect cover. No one questions charitable donations to expand consciousness or whatever. My heart raced. This was the proof I needed. But Grandma's face fell. She found it this morning. Came by for breakfast and saw me trying to hide it. She grabbed it and smashed it against the wall. She pointed to the corner where pieces of black plastic were still scattered. Then she told me I was having dementia episodes, that I was imagining things. She even called your parents to tell them I was getting confused and paranoid. I hugged Grandma tightly. I believe you. We're going to figure this out. The next few weeks were a nightmare of damage control. I had to constantly monitor my credit for new accounts. 3 more cards were opened despite the fraud alerts I'd placed. Each time, Stella had somehow gotten around the security measures using information she'd stolen from Grandma's files. At work, I walked on eggshells. Every email was triple-checked. Every interaction carefully documented. The client accepted my apology grudgingly, but I could tell Kyle was watching my every move. Then Uncle Jerry's daughter Ashley called me out of the blue. Hey, I know we haven't talked much since I started college, but I'm majoring in accounting and something weird is going on with our family's finances. We met at a diner near her campus. Ashley had spread out papers across the entire table, her laptop open with multiple spreadsheets. I started looking into this after Grandma's money disappeared, she said, adjusting her glasses. But it's not just Grandma. I've found similar patterns with Great-Aunt Nietzsche. But it's not just Grandma. I've found similar patterns with Great-Aunt Nietzsche, Uncle Klaus's elderly mother, and at least 3 other relatives. She showed me bank records from multiple accounts. The same pattern every time. Stella would volunteer to help with finances. Then systematic withdrawals would begin, all going to various spiritual retreats and healing centers. How much total? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Over $200,000 across all the victims, and that's just what I can document. Some of the elderly relatives are too embarrassed to admit they were scammed. Ashley had done her homework. She'd tracked down other families who'd been scammed by Serenity Spirit Retreat and found lawsuits in 3 different states. Moonbeam's real name was McBenjamin, and she'd been running similar schemes for years. "We need to stop her," Ashley said. "But it's going to take more than just bank records. Stella's got mom and dad completely fooled, and she's good at playing the victim." Thanksgiving arrived before we could make our move. The family gathered at my parents' house, and I debated not going. But Ashley convinced me we needed to present a united front. Stella sat at the center of attention, as always. Halfway through dinner, she stood up and clinked her glass. "I have an announcement." She placed her hand on her stomach. "I'm pregnant. The universe has blessed me with this gift, but as a single mother, I'm going to need help." The room erupted in congratulations. Mom started crying and hugging her. Dad immediately offered to help with expenses. Even relatives who'd been skeptical about the spiritual retreat situation seemed to soften, but Ashley wasn't buying it. While everyone fawned over Stella, she quietly pulled me aside. "Look at this." On her phone was Stella's social media from just 2 weeks ago, showing her doing shots at a bar. Then another post about starting a new cleanse that specifically mentioned not being pregnant. "There's more," Ashley whispered. She showed me a receipt from a website that sold fake medical documents. The order was for 1 ultrasound image, expedited shipping to Stella's address. We watched as Stella pulled out an ultrasound photo, passing it around the table. Family members cooed over it, already making plans for baby showers and nursery furniture. That's when Ashley stood up. "That's interesting, Stella. Especially since you bought that ultrasound online last week." The room went silent. Stella's face cycled through emotions before settling on outrage. "How dare you accuse me of something so horrible?" But Ashley was ready. She connected her laptop to the TV and started presenting her evidence: the receipt for the fake ultrasound, the social media posts about drinking, the pattern of theft from elderly relatives. "You've stolen over $200,000 from this family," Ashley said calmly, "and now you're faking a pregnancy to steal more." Stella tried to run out, but Uncle Jerry blocked the door. "I think we all need to hear this," he said, his face grim. For the next hour, Ashley laid out everything: the fraudulent credit cards in my name, the systematic theft from multiple relatives, the connection to McBenjamin and her history of scamming families. By the end, even Mom couldn't defend Stella anymore. She sat there in shock, while Dad's face grew redder with each revelation. But the real bombshell came 3 weeks later. We were at Grandma's house for Sunday dinner when cars pulled up outside. Not just any cars, but government vehicles with official plates. 2 IRS agents walked to the door. They were investigating tax fraud related to charitable donations to Serenity Spirit Retreat. Apparently, Stella had been claiming donations in everyone's names, getting tax breaks while funneling the money to herself and McBenjamin. The agents had questions for all of us. How much had we actually donated? Did we have receipts? Had we authorized these claims? As it turned out, Ashley had been busy. She'd compiled all her evidence and submitted it to the IRS whistleblower program. The fake charity was under federal investigation, and they'd already frozen the accounts. Stella tried one last manipulation. "This is all a misunderstanding. My brother put me up to this. He's the one who's been stealing." But then McBenjamin arrived, flanked by her lawyer. Facing serious federal charges, she was ready to make a deal. Stella McAlexandra was the one who suggested we expand the operation to her family. "I have emails, texts, recorded conversations. I'll provide everything in exchange for leniency." The look on Stella's face as her spiritual advisor threw her under the bus was something I'll never forget. All her manipulation, all her tears and dramatic performances meant nothing in the face of federal charges. The agents arrested Stella right there in Grandma's living room. As they led her away in handcuffs, she was still trying to spin the story, claiming I'd forced her into it, that she was the real victim. The next months were a whirlwind of legal procedures. With McBenjamin's cooperation and Ashley's meticulous documentation, the case against Stella was airtight. She was charged with tax fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse. The best part was the restitution. The court ordered all the stolen money to be returned. Grandma got her $15,000 back. The relatives who'd been scammed received their money, and my credit was finally cleared of all the fraudulent debt. At Stella's sentencing, she tried one more performance, crying about how she'd been led astray by false spiritual guidance, but the judge wasn't moved. 5 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of probation and mandatory restitution payments. As we left the courthouse, Grandma took my hand. "Thank you for not letting me sell my house," she said, "and for believing in me when I told you about the recording." Ashley grinned. Who knew my accounting degree would be useful for taking down family fraud? My parents approached hesitantly. They'd been quiet throughout the trial, finally seeing how deeply they'd been manipulated. Dad cleared his throat. "We owe you an apology. We should have believed you from the start." Mom nodded, tears in her eyes. "We were so blinded by Stella's act. Can you ever forgive us?" It would take time to rebuild those relationships, but I was willing to try. The important thing was that the truth had finally come out. Lauren squeezed my hand as we walked to the car. "You know what the ironic part is? Stella always claimed to see visions of the future, but she never saw this coming." I laughed for the first time in months. My credit was clear, my job was secure, and my family finally knew the truth. Stella's reign of manipulation was over, and we could all start healing from the damage she'd caused. As for Moonbeam or McBenjamin, She got 2 years in minimum security and had to pay back every cent she'd stolen. The Serenity Spirit Retreat was shut down, its assets liquidated to pay back victims. Sometimes I think about visiting Stella in prison, but I always decide against it. She made her choices, and now she has to live with the consequences. The family is closer now, united by the experience of being deceived and the relief of finally seeing justice done. Grandma still lives in her house. Her finance is now managed by Ashley, who provides monthly reports to the entire family. Full transparency, no more secrets, and definitely no more spiritual advisors named after celestial bodies. The months following Stella's arrest brought a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. I thought the worst was behind us, but cleaning up the mess she'd left behind proved to be its own challenge. The first issue came when I tried to refinance my car loan. Despite the court clearing my fraudulent debt, my credit score was still in ruins. The loan officer at the bank explained that while the fraudulent accounts were removed, the months of missed payments and collections notices had done their damage. It would take years to rebuild. Ashley became our family's unofficial financial detective. She'd set up a small office in Grandma's spare bedroom, complete with filing cabinets and a whiteboard, tracking all the financial damage Stella had caused. Every week, she'd discover something new. "Found another one," she announced. During one of our weekly meetings, she slid a folder across Grandma's kitchen table. Inside were bank statements for our cousin Nicholas's elderly mother. The same pattern of withdrawals, all to spiritual healing centers. "That makes victim number 12, I said, adding the information to our growing spreadsheet. Grandma shook her head sadly. Poor Klaus. He trusted Stella to help with his mother's bills while he was deployed overseas. The doorbell interrupted our discussion. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in her 50s holding a clipboard. She introduced herself as a representative from the state's Elder Care Services, responding to reports of financial abuse. "We received multiple complaints about systematic theft from elderly family members," she explained, reviewing her notes. "I need to interview each victim and assess their current financial situation." The interviews took weeks. Each elderly relative had to relive the embarrassment of being scammed by someone they trusted. Great Aunt Nietzsche broke down crying when she admitted she'd given Stella her deceased husband's life insurance payout for spiritual cleansing. Meanwhile, my work situation remained precarious. Kyle had kept his word about the probation, but I could feel the tension every time I walked into the office. My co-workers whispered when they thought I wasn't listening. The client I'd supposedly insulted made snide comments during every meeting. One afternoon, Kyle called me into his office. My stomach dropped, expecting the worst. "Relax," he said, noticing my expression. "You're not in trouble. Actually, I wanted to apologize." He explained that IT had done a deeper investigation into the social media posts. They'd found evidence of remote access software installed on my work computer during the exact time frame when Stella had visited my office for lunch months ago. "She played us all," Kyle admitted. "I should have trusted you from the start." The apology helped, but the damage to my reputation lingered. Projects that would have automatically come to me were now assigned to others. My annual review, despite Kyle's support, reflected the incident in my performance rating. Lauren stood by me through it all, but I could see the stress wearing on her too. She'd changed all her passwords and privacy settings after the anonymous messages, but remained paranoid about what else Stella might have done. Her fears proved justified when she got a call from her apartment complex. Someone had tried to break her lease by submitting a forged notice with her signature. The property manager only called because the signature looked suspicious. "She's still trying to hurt us from prison," Lauren said, her hands shaking as she filed yet another fraud report. Ashley discovered that Stella had been more thorough than we'd initially realized. During her time handling various relatives' finances, she'd gathered copies of everyone's personal documents, birth certificates, social security cards, tax returns. She had it all stored in a safety deposit box that Ashley found referenced in her bank records. Getting access to that box required a court order, which meant more legal fees we couldn't afford. Dad finally stepped up and covered the costs, his guilt over enabling Stella for so long driving him to help however he could. The box's contents were disturbing. Stella had created detailed files on each family member, including personal information that could be used for identity theft. There were half-completed credit applications, forged signatures she'd been practicing, even fake medical records she'd started creating. "She was planning this for years," Ashley said, sorting through the documents. "Look at these dates. Some of this goes back to when she first started talking about spiritual awakening." Mom had the hardest time accepting the depth of Stella's deception. She'd attend therapy sessions, but would still sometimes defend Stella's actions as a cry for help or blame Moonbeam's influence. This caused tension at family gatherings. Uncle Jerry, who'd initially wanted me to take the fall, now overcompensated by being extremely harsh about Stella. He'd make comments about her being dead to the family, which would send Mom into tears. "She's still my daughter," Mom would say, clutching tissues. A daughter who systematically robbed her own family," Jerry would retort. These arguments became so common that several relatives stopped attending family dinners altogether. The very gatherings Stella had used to manipulate us were now tainted by her absence and the conflicts she left behind. 3 months into Stella's sentence, I received a letter from her. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The letter was classic Stella, a mix of manipulation and blame-shifting. She wrote about how prison was transforming her spiritual journey and how she'd found clarity about the negative energy that led her astray. She never once took actual responsibility, instead suggesting that the family's materialistic values had forced her to take extreme measures. The worst part was her request. She wanted me to add money to her commissary account because other inmates were jealous of her spiritual gifts, and she needed funds for protection and basic necessities. I threw the letter away, but more kept coming, each one with increasingly desperate requests and wild claims about prison conspiracies against her. I eventually had to file paperwork to block her correspondence. Ashley's investigation skills proved valuable beyond just family finances. She'd connected with other victims of Moonbeam scams through online forums and discovered a pattern we'd missed. "Look at this," she said during one of our meetings, showing me a map she'd created. Every city where Moonbeam operated, she partnered with someone local, someone who could vouch for her and bring in victims from their personal network. The FBI agent assigned to the financial fraud case found this information valuable enough to expand their investigation. They discovered Moonbeam had similar partnerships in 6 states, with Stella being one of her most successful recruiters. This led to additional charges against Stella, extending her sentence. When Mom heard the news, she finally broke down and admitted what we'd all been waiting to hear. "I knew something was wrong," she sobbed. "When Stella was a teenager, she'd steal from my purse and blame others. I always made excuses, always protected her. I created this monster." Dad held her as she cried, his own eyes wet. It was the first time I'd seen them truly accept responsibility for enabling Stella's behavior. The healing process for our family was slow and painful. Trust had been shattered in ways that went beyond just the financial theft. Every interaction was colored by the betrayal we'd experienced. Grandma struggled the most. The woman who'd always been the family's pillar of strength now second-guessed every decision. She'd call me multiple times a day to verify small transactions, or ask if it was safe to give her credit card number for online orders. "What if someone else tries to trick me?" she'd ask, her voice small and uncertain. We set up a system where Ashley and I both had view-only access to her accounts. Any transaction over $50 would trigger an alert to both of us. It gave Grandma peace of mind, but I hated that Stella had stolen her independence along with her money. The financial recovery was equally challenging. Even with restitution ordered, the money came in slowly. The government had seized what they could from the fake charity, but much had already been spent. Stella's personal assets were minimal. She'd lived entirely off her victims. Some relatives had to sell possessions to cover bills while waiting for restitution. Uncle Klaus' mother had to move in with him because she could no longer afford her assisted living facility. The dominoes of Stella's crimes kept falling. I threw myself into work, trying to rebuild my professional reputation. Slowly, project by project, I regained my colleagues' trust. The client who threatened to leave eventually admitted they'd overreacted to the fake posts. "In hindsight, it didn't even sound like you," he said during a meeting. "Too much emotion, not enough data, should have known something was off." Lauren and I grew stronger through the ordeal. We developed a system of complete transparency, sharing past regularly. What could have torn us apart had instead built an unshakable foundation of trust. "At least we know we can handle anything now," she said one evening as we reviewed our credit reports together, a monthly ritual we'd started. The extended family slowly began to heal too. Ashley's detective work had earned her enormous respect, and several relatives started consulting her for financial advice. She turned our family's tragedy into motivation for her studies, eventually deciding to specialize in forensic accounting. "I want to help other families avoid what we went through," she explained when announcing her career plans. Nicholas, whose mother had been one of Stella's victims, started a support group for families affected by financial fraud. The monthly meetings were held at the community center and surprisingly well attended. "You'd be amazed how many people have similar stories," he told me after one meeting. "Elder abuse, identity theft, family members taking advantage, it's more common than anyone wants to admit." I started attending the meetings, finding comfort in shared experiences. Hearing other stories helped me process my own anger and betrayal. One woman's story particularly resonated. Her brother had stolen their parents' retirement funds for a gambling addiction. "The hardest part isn't the money," she said during one session. "It's learning to trust again. Every family gathering, every financial discussion, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop." Her words perfectly captured what our family was experiencing. The hypervigilance was exhausting. Every unexpected bill made us wonder if we'd missed something. Every relative who seemed too interested in finances raised red flags. Dad started his own journey of making amends. He reached out to each relative Stella had stolen from, personally apologizing for his role in enabling her. Some accepted his apologies graciously. Others remained cold. "I should have seen it," he told Great-Aunt Nietzsche during one visit. "All those times she had expensive things she couldn't afford. All the lies I chose to believe. I failed as a father." Nietzsche, despite losing her husband's life insurance money, showed remarkable grace. "We all wanted to believe the best in her. That's what family does. The failure is hers, not yours." These conversations helped Dad work through his guilt. Though I could see it would be a long process. He'd started therapy and was finally addressing the dynamics that had led him to favor Stella so blatantly. Mom's journey was more complicated. She joined a support group for parents of incarcerated adults, but struggled with the stigma. In her mind, having a child in prison reflected on her worth as a mother. "I keep thinking about where I went wrong," she confided one afternoon. "Was it giving her too much? Not enough discipline? Should I have gotten her help sooner?" The questions had no easy answers. The therapist helped her understand that while parenting choices had contributed, Stella's actions were ultimately her own responsibility. 6 months into Stella's sentence, we received notice that McBenjamin was testifying in additional cases. Her cooperation was uncovering a nationwide network of spiritual retreat scams. The investigation had grown far beyond our family's situation. Ashley followed the cases closely, creating a database of victims and patterns. She'd become something of an expert on spiritual financial fraud, even giving a presentation at her college about recognizing the warning signs. The key is the isolation, she explained to the audience. They separate victims from skeptical family members, create an us versus them mentality. Anyone who questions the spiritual journey becomes the enemy. Her presentation was recorded and shared widely online, helping other families recognize similar situations. We started getting emails from people across the country, sharing their own stories of spiritual scam artists. One email particularly stood out. A man in Arizona wrote about his daughter who joined a similar retreat and was pressuring elderly relatives for money. He'd seen Ashley's presentation and realized the patterns matched exactly. "You might have saved my family," he wrote. "We're getting her help before it goes too far." These small victories helped balance the ongoing challenges. Every person helped, every scam prevented, felt like turning our pain into purpose. The one-year anniversary of Stella's arrest approached with mixed emotions. We'd survived the immediate crisis, but the healing was far from complete. Trust remained fragile, relationships were still strained, and the financial recovery continued slowly. Grandma suggested we have a family dinner to mark the occasion, not to celebrate, but to acknowledge how far we'd come. The gathering was smaller than our old Sunday dinners, some relatives still choosing to keep their distance. "A year ago, I thought I'd lost everything," Grandma said, raising her glass of apple cider. "My money, my trust, my family's unity. But look at us now. Bruised, but not broken. Wiser and more careful, but still together." Uncle Jerry added, "We learned expensive lessons about trust and verification, but we also learned we can count on each other when it really matters." The toast felt like a turning point, not an ending, but a recognition that we'd survived the worst and were slowly rebuilding. The empty chair where Stella used to sit was obvious, but no longer dominated the room. Ashley had prepared a presentation, of course. She had, showing the financial recovery progress. Charts and graphs demonstrated how much restitution had been received, credit scores improving, and elderly relatives' finances stabilizing. "We're about 60% recovered financially," she reported. "Full recovery is projected within another 18 months, assuming restitution payments continue as scheduled." The numbers were encouraging, but the emotional recovery couldn't be graphed so easily. That would take much longer, possibly forever. Some wounds leave permanent scars. As the dinner wound down, Mom pulled me aside. "I need to apologize properly," she said. "Not just for believing Stella over you, but for all the years of favoritism. You deserved better." It was the apology I'd waited decades to hear. I hugged her, feeling some of the old resentment finally start to fade. We all deserved better, but we're working on it now. Dad joined us, adding his own apologies. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had real parents, not just people who happened to raise me while focusing on my sister. The transformation wasn't complete. There were still awkward moments and old patterns to break, but the willingness to change, to acknowledge past mistakes, made all the difference. As I drove home that night with Lauren, I reflected on the strange journey we'd been on. Stella's crimes had torn our family apart, but in a twisted way, they'd also forced us to confront dysfunctions that had existed for years. "Think we'll ever be normal?" Lauren asked, reading my thoughts. "Define normal," I replied. "Every family has their issues. At least now we're dealing with ours honestly." She squeezed my hand. "True. And we've got Ashley as our financial watchdog. No one's getting scammed on her watch." The thought made me smile. Ashley had found her calling in protecting our family and others from financial predators. She'd already helped several elderly relatives set up better financial safeguards and was teaching them to recognize common scams. My phone buzzed with a text from Ashley. "Found 3 more victims in McBenjamin's network. Adding them to the FBI case file. This is getting bigger every day." The investigation continued to expand, reaching into multiple states and uncovering dozens of similar operations. Stella had been a small player in a much larger criminal network. Though she'd certainly been an enthusiastic participant, work had finally returned to normal. Kyle had promoted me to lead a new project, a sign that my reputation had recovered. The team respected my attention to detail, a skill sharpened by months of fraud detection. "You've got the most thorough documentation I've ever seen," a colleague commented during a review. "Every decision tracked, every change logged. It's impressive." I didn't mention that hypervigilance born from betrayal had its professional advantages. The constant need to verify and document everything translated well to project management. Lauren and I had also started couples therapy, not because we were struggling, but because we wanted to process the trauma together. The therapist helped us recognize how the experience had changed us, some ways positive, others requiring work. "You both developed impressive crisis management skills," she observed. "But you need to learn when it's safe to relax that vigilance." She was right. We'd been in survival mode for so long that we'd forgotten how to simply exist without constant worry. Every unexpected expense, every unknown phone number, every official-looking letter triggered anxiety. Grandma had made the most progress in some ways. She'd joined Nicholas's support group and become something of a mentor to newer victims. Her story of recovery gave others hope. The money was just money, she'd tell them. It's the trust that's hard to rebuild, but it can be done one day at a time. Her wisdom helped many, including family members still struggling with the betrayal. She'd forgiven Stella, not for Stella's sake, but for her own peace of mind. "Holding on to anger only hurts me," she explained. Stella's facing her consequences. I choose to focus on healing. Not everyone shared her perspective. Some relatives remained bitter, refusing to speak Stella's name. The family fractures ran deep, and not all would heal. As we approached the 18-month mark of Stella's incarceration, the restitution payments suddenly stopped. Ashley investigated and discovered Stella had been placed in solitary confinement for running a commissary scam within the prison. She convinced new inmates to invest their commissary money in a meditation program she was running, Ashley reported, shaking her head. Even in prison, she can't stop scamming people. The news didn't surprise anyone, but it did dash hopes that Stella might be reforming. She'd simply found a new captive audience for her schemes. This led to additional charges and extended sentences. Mom stopped visiting after learning about the prison scam. It was the final straw that broke her denial about Stella's true nature. She'll never change, Mom said quietly. I've been fooling myself thinking prison would fix her. Some people are just broken. It was a harsh realization, but a necessary one. The family could finally stop waiting for Stella to transform and focus on moving forward without her. The 2-year mark of Stella's incarceration brought unexpected developments. Ashley burst through Grandma's door during our weekly meeting, laptop under her arm and papers flying everywhere. You're not going to believe this, she said, catching her breath. Remember how I've been tracking McBenjamin's network? I found something huge. She pulled up a spreadsheet showing wire transfers between Serenity Spirit Retreat and dozens of shell companies. The amounts were staggering. Millions of dollars flowing through accounts in different states. Stella wasn't just recruiting victims, Ashley explained, pointing to highlighted transactions. She was helping launder money for the entire operation. Look at these dates. They match perfectly with when she had access to everyone's financial information. I studied the data, recognizing patterns from my own fraud detection work. Each transfer was carefully structured to stay under reporting thresholds, spread across multiple accounts to avoid detection. We need to get this to the FBI immediately, I said, already reaching for my phone. But Ashley shook her head. I already tried. The agent said they're overwhelmed with the existing case. Unless we can prove direct connections to specific crimes, it's just suspicious activity. Grandma, who'd been quietly listening, suddenly spoke up. What about that safety deposit box at First National? The one Stella mentioned during her last visit before the arrest. Ashley and I exchanged glances. We'd forgotten about that offhand comment Stella had made about keeping insurance at a bank across town. The next morning, armed with court orders Ashley had prepared, we arrived at First National Bank. The manager was cooperative. Rental was overdue. We were about to drill it open next week, he said, leading us to the vault. The rental hasn't been paid in months. Inside the box, we found exactly what we'd hoped for and more. Stella had kept meticulous records of every transaction, every victim, every dollar moved through the spiritual retreat network. There were USB drives, printed emails, even recorded conversations with McBenjamin discussing expansion plans. One document made my blood freeze. It was a list titled Phase 2 Targets with names of wealthy elderly relatives from other families in our area. Next to each name were notes about vulnerabilities, recent widowhood, mild dementia, trusting nature. She was planning to expand beyond our family, Ashley said, photographing everything. These people have no idea they were being targeted. We spent hours documenting the contents. Among the financial records were personal items that revealed more about Stella's mindset. Journal entries detailed her resentment toward me dating back to childhood. She wrote about feeling entitled to more than her share because she was the special one. One entry particularly stood out. They'll never suspect the pregnancy angle. Mom's baby fever will override any logic. Already ordered the ultrasound prints. High quality, worth the extra cost. The FBI agent's attitude changed dramatically when we delivered the evidence. Within days, the investigation expanded exponentially. The safety deposit box contents revealed connections to similar operations in 12 states, all using the same playbook Stella had perfected. Kyle called me into his office the following week, but this time with good news. Remember that client who almost left over the fake social media posts? They want you to lead their new security audit project. Apparently, your attention to detail during the fraud situation impressed them. The project came with a significant raise and a team of analysts reporting to me. I'd inadvertently become the company's expert on fraud detection and prevention. Lauren and I were having dinner when my phone rang. It was Mom, barely coherent through her tears. They're transferring Stella to federal maximum security. She attacked another inmate who wouldn't join her investment scheme. The assault had added years to Stella's sentence. During the investigation, authorities discovered she'd been running multiple scams within the prison. Fake legal services, spiritual counseling, even a pyramid scheme involving commissary items. 23 victims just within the prison. Mom sobbed. How did I raise someone like this? Dad took the phone. We're flying out tomorrow for the hearing. The prosecutor wants family members to testify about patterns of behavior. I declined to go, but Ashley volunteered. She returned with disturbing news. Stella had shown no remorse during the hearing, instead claiming everyone was conspiring against her because they were spiritually inferior. The psychiatrist testified that she shows signs of severe antisocial personality disorder, Ashley reported. She literally can't feel empathy for her victims. This diagnosis helped Mom finally accept what we'd all known. Stella wasn't going to change. The daughter she'd protected and enabled was incapable of genuine human connection. Meanwhile, the ripple effects of our evidence continued. McBenjamin, facing additional decades in prison, had turned state's evidence completely. Her testimony led to arrests across the country. The network was unraveling faster than prosecutors could process cases. One morning, I arrived at work to find a woman waiting in the lobby. She introduced herself as Nichi Chen, one of the names from Stella's Phase 2 list. "The FBI contacted me yesterday," she said, clutching her purse. "They said your sister was planning to target me through my church group. I wanted to thank you personally for stopping her." She explained that her husband had recently passed, leaving her a substantial inheritance. Stella had apparently been attending her church's grief support group under a false name, gathering information. "I'm ashamed to admit I probably would have fallen for it," Nichi said. "She seemed so caring, so spiritual. I even gave her my phone number. We talked for an hour. I gave her Ashley's contact information and recommended Nicholas's support group." Even though she hadn't lost money, the psychological impact of almost being victimized was real. These encounters became common. As news of the nationwide bust spread, more potential victims came forward. Some had already given small amounts to test investments, others had been in the early stages of manipulation. Ashley turned these connections into purpose. She started a non-profit focused on education about spiritual financial fraud. Using her research and our family's story, she developed training programs for senior centers and churches. "If we can prevent even one family from going through what we did, it's worth it," she said during the non-profit's launch event. The event was held at the community center where Nicholas ran his support group. Grandma gave the keynote speech, sharing her story with remarkable composure. The room was packed with families affected by similar scams. During the reception, a man approached me. He introduced himself as Klaus Werner, Nicholas's father. "I wanted to apologize for my brother Jerry's behavior early on. Asking you to take the blame was inexcusable." I appreciated the gesture, though Jerry himself remained too proud to apologize directly. Family dynamics were slowly shifting as people processed their roles in enabling Stella's behavior. The 3-year anniversary of Stella's arrest arrived with significant news. The Department of Justice announced the complete dismantling of the spiritual retreat fraud network. Over 200 people had been arrested, millions in assets recovered. Our family's case was cited as the breakthrough that exposed the entire operation. Ashley was invited to testify before Congress about elder financial abuse and the need for stronger protections. I watched her testimony from my office, feeling proud of how she'd transformed our trauma into advocacy. She spoke eloquently about the warning signs families should watch for and the importance of financial transparency. "My cousin Stella stole more than money," Ashley told the committee. "She stole trust, security, and peace of mind. But through vigilance and cooperation, we can prevent others from experiencing this devastation." Her testimony led to new legislation requiring additional verification for large transfers from elderly accounts. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Lauren and I had moved into a new house, finally feeling secure enough to make long-term plans. During the housewarming party, I noticed Mom and Dad seemed lighter somehow. They'd been attending therapy consistently, and it showed. "We're selling the house," Dad announced quietly. "Too many memories. We found a smaller place closer to Grandma." It was the right decision. The house where we'd held those tense family meetings, where Stella had performed her manipulations, needed to be left behind. Grandma had fully recovered financially and emotionally. She'd even started dating a gentleman from Nicholas's support group, another widower who'd lost money to a different scam. "We understand each other," she told me with a girlish smile. "Neither of us will ever be naive about money again." As the federal cases concluded, restitution payments increased. Every family member who'd been scammed received full compensation plus interest. The government had seized so many assets from the network that victims actually came out ahead financially. I used my portion to establish an emergency fund for the family, a resource available to any relative facing financial hardship. Ashley managed it with her typical thoroughness, requiring documentation, but ensuring no one would feel desperate enough to fall for scams. The fund's first recipient was surprisingly Uncle Jerry. He'd been too proud to admit his business was struggling, but when faced with bankruptcy, he finally asked for help. The loan was approved with reasonable terms and a clear repayment plan. "Thank you," he said simply when I handed him the check. It was the closest he'd come to apologizing for his earlier behavior. Work continued to thrive. My fraud detection expertise had become so valuable that other companies started trying to poach me. Kyle responded by promoting me to Vice President of Security Operations with a team of 20 analysts. "You've built something special here," he said during the announcement. "Your personal experience gave you insights that no textbook could teach." Lauren had started her own journey, volunteering with Ashley's nonprofit as a counselor for families dealing with financial betrayal. Her experience supporting me through the crisis made her uniquely qualified to help others. One evening, as we reviewed applications for the emergency fund, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something made me answer. It was a collect call from federal prison. Stella's voice came through, sounding different, older, tired. "I know you don't want to hear from me," she began, "but I needed to tell someone. McBenjamin died yesterday. Heart attack in her cell." I stayed silent, unsure why she was calling me with this information. "She left a confession," Stella continued, "about other victims, ones the FBI didn't know about. I could give them the information, but I want something in return." Here it was, another manipulation, another angle. Even after everything, she was still scheming. "What do you want?" I asked, already knowing I'd report this to the FBI regardless. "I want to see Mom. Just once, she hasn't visited in 2 years." I told her I'd pass along the message and hung up. When I informed the FBI about the potential additional victims, they said they'd handle it through official channels. Stella would gain nothing from her attempted bargain. Mom chose not to visit. I've mourned the daughter I thought I had, she explained. Seeing her now would only hurt. The additional victims were located and compensated from remaining seized assets. Stella received no benefit for the information she'd been forced to provide anyway. As we approached the 4th anniversary of the arrest, life had settled into a new normal. The family was smaller but stronger, bound by shared survival rather than blood alone. Some relatives had drifted away, unable to process the betrayal. Others had grown closer through the crisis. Ashley's nonprofit had expanded to 3 states, with educational programs reaching thousands of potential victims. She'd received national recognition for her work, turning down lucrative job offers to continue her mission. "This is where I'm meant to be," she said at the latest board meeting. "Every scam we prevent honors what our family went through." Nicholas's support group had also grown, becoming a model for similar programs nationwide. He'd written a book about recognizing and recovering from family financial fraud with proceeds going to victim assistance. I'd implemented new security protocols at work that had prevented several attempted corporate frauds. My team had become the gold standard for financial security operations consulted by companies across the industry. One afternoon, while reviewing a particularly complex case, I realized something profound. Stella's betrayal, as devastating as it was, had transformed all of us in unexpected ways. We'd discovered strengths we didn't know we had, built careers from crisis, and helped countless others avoid similar pain. The irony wasn't lost on me. Stella had wanted to elevate herself above the family, to be special and superior. Instead, her crimes had elevated us, not spiritually, but practically. We'd become experts, advocates, and protectors. A knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. Lauren entered with a smile and an envelope. "This just came," she said. "It's from that family in Arizona you helped last year." Inside was a photo of a reunited family and a letter thanking us for preventing their daughter from falling deeper into a spiritual scam. They'd gotten her help, and she was now in recovery, working to make amends. "We caught it early thanks to you," the letter read. "Our family is healing instead of shattered." These letters came regularly now, tangible proof that our pain had purpose. Each prevented scam, each educated family, each recovered victim added meaning to what we'd endured. The emergency fund had helped 12 family members through various crises without anyone resorting to predatory schemes. Jerry had repaid his loan in full and even contributed extra to help it grow. Grandma celebrated her 80th birthday surrounded by family and her new boyfriend, Klaus. She gave a toast that brought tears to everyone's eyes. 5 years ago, I thought I'd lost everything. Today, I see I've gained so much more. We're not the same family we were. We're better, wiser, kinder, and united by truth instead of pretense. As the party continued, I stepped outside for fresh air. Ashley joined me, holding her own glass of champagne. "Did you ever think we'd get here?" she asked. "Never," I admitted. "I thought Stella had destroyed us." "Maybe she did," Ashley said thoughtfully. "But we built something better from the pieces." Inside, Lauren was helping Mom serve cake, while Dad told stories that actually included me for once. The favoritism that had defined my childhood was gone, replaced by genuine appreciation for who I'd become. My phone buzzed with an email from the FBI. They were closing the last of the cases related to the spiritual fraud network. Final restitution payments would be distributed within 60 days. It was truly over. As I rejoined the party, I realized this was what victory looked like. Not a dramatic confrontation or vengeful triumph, but a room full of people who'd survived betrayal and chosen to build rather than break. Stella remained in prison, her sentence extended by her continued schemes. She'd likely spend most of her life there, unable to stop manipulating even when it only hurt herself.